The bench was made of cold iron and peeling green paint, and it stood near the far end of the platform, slightly out of the line of sight from the main entrance, as if time had forgotten it there. But that was precisely where they met, day after day, morning after morning, without fail and without intention, two people whose lives brushed in silence but never collided, like shadows passing on opposite sides of a frosted window. She always arrived first, 23 minutes before the train was scheduled, carrying a small leather-bound notebook she rarely wrote in, sitting with her back straight, her legs crossed at the ankle, her bag placed carefully on her left side as if saving a space she never quite claimed belonged to anyone, yet never let go unused either. And then, 9 minutes later, he would appear, not rushed, not slow, just steady, always wearing the same dark wool coat with slightly frayed cuffs, carrying a newspaper folded under his arm, and with eyes that never scanned the platform but always found the bench with an ease that suggested it had become more than routine, more than a habit, almost something he belonged to before the day had even started. He never looked at her directly, and she never shifted to acknowledge him, but the moment he sat down, always on her right, never once changing sides, there was a pause in the air, a faint stillness, as if the station itself waited alongside them, breath held between announcements, in that space between movement and memory. The train would come, it always came, with its tired doors and soft screech, and they would both stand at the same moment, without speaking, without hesitation, never watching each other but never unaware either, stepping into different carriages of the same train, carried forward on parallel tracks of lives they never chose to intertwine. No one else seemed to notice this quiet ritual, or if they did, they didn't care, but for the 7 minutes before the train arrived, every weekday morning, in the gray light that made everything feel a little suspended, they shared something that neither of them ever named, something that lived not in words or glances, but in the way she always shifted slightly to give him room, and in the way he never let the newspaper rustle too loudly. Sometimes, a breeze would move the hem of her coat to brush against his, and neither of them would pull away, as if the contact, though accidental, had been expected, like a leaf landing on water, unnoticed but inevitable. She never knew where he went, and he never wondered where she came from, that was not what this was, and still, on the mornings when she arrived and found the bench empty, those few minutes before he appeared stretched longer than they should have, filled with something unspoken, like waiting for a sentence that had always been there but never dared to be said aloud. And once, just once, when it rained, not heavily, just enough to soak through the fabric and make every surface a little colder, he brought an umbrella and tilted it ever so slightly, enough to cover the space between them, without a word, without a glance, as if that simple act of shelter had been rehearsed in the silence of all the mornings before. But she did not thank him, and he did not expect it. That was never part of it. It was not a love story. Not yet. It was something quieter, something slower, like the way fog slips through streets before the city wakes up, unnoticed by most, but heavy with presence. Spring turned slowly to summer, but the mornings remained gray at that hour, suspended in a kind of gentle pause before the world took form. She had started arriving a few minutes earlier now, not enough to be noticed by anyone else, not enough to be intentional, but just enough that the space on the bench no longer felt like something shared but something held, quietly, expectantly, without change and without demand. The air was warmer, but she still wore the same coat, and still opened the notebook that had long ceased to hold any new words. Sometimes she turned a page. Sometimes she did not. He never missed a day, not even once, and even when his eyes looked heavier, when the shadows under them darkened with something unsaid, he kept to the same step, the same time, the same place. His coat had changed, a lighter one now, but the newspaper under his arm remained, and though he never unfolded it while she was there, she suspected that he still read the same section first, the corner of the page slightly bent from repetition. The umbrella moment had never repeated itself, and they never spoke of it, though speaking was, of course, not something they did at all, but ever since that morning, something in the space between them had shifted, not visibly, not in a way that anyone else would sense, but in the weight of silence that now felt not like absence, but like understanding. There were days when the train arrived late, and during those longer waits, their stillness became almost architectural, something part of the platform itself, unmoved, necessary, like the bench that held them. The world moved around them, hurried steps, suitcase wheels, distant announcements, pigeons pacing with aimless certainty, but they remained, two outlines held in a frame no one else could see. Once, a man sat between them. Just a traveler, unaware. He sat for only 4 minutes, checked his phone, adjusted his jacket, and left, and neither of them shifted during that interruption, but afterward, she waited a fraction longer before crossing her legs again, and he unfolded the newspaper, just briefly, as if to re-anchor the morning. They never smiled at each other, not even faintly. It wasn't needed. And yet, there were days when the breath between them aligned, when the rise and fall of her chest matched his, not in rhythm but in weight, and that felt closer than any glance could have been. Autumn arrived without ceremony. Leaves gathered near the tracks, carried by a wind that smelled faintly of iron and sleep, and her coat changed color, a darker blue now, almost charcoal, but the notebook remained, and the bench remained, and he continued to arrive 9 minutes after her. But now she noticed that his steps had slowed just slightly, not tired, but careful, as if time had begun to press more closely against him than before. She never turned to look, but she heard it, the faint drag in his stride, the hesitation before sitting, the breath that paused before lowering himself into place.